Ascended Master Consciousness is not passive. It just happens to be so high vibrational, so ascended, that it will look disassociative if we are very far away from it. The more we embody it, we'll actually see that in the human form, once it's truly integrated within our body, mind, spirit, that actually Ascended Master Consciousness is how we will experience a paradigm shift. It's all done through Ascended Master Consciousness. The true meaning of the term Ascended Master has become lost and even confused within the spirit of this age. So today, I'm going to be explaining exactly what Ascended Master means. When we think of the term Ascended Master, we usually think of a human who'd gone through spiritual initiation and then ascended all the way up into becoming a master. And we could see why people would think that, because an ascended master would naturally assume that somebody had mastered ascension. However, ascended master's true meaning is that it is actually an eternal form of consciousness. So, ascended master is a level of consciousness that is outside of human form. It's outside of even this density. So, when we think of what embodiment means inside this age, we usually think of embodiment as being some form of healing, right? We've heard embodiment thrown around in the spiritual community for a very long time now. But actually, embodiment is not a phrase that should be talked about unless we know what is embodying. So what is being embodied? Ascended Master Consciousness is what is being embodied. So the whole point of us knowing how important embodiment is in this age, and we hear this term embodiment everywhere we turn, we first have to understand what's being embodied. And that is our higher self. But if we want to look at this a completely different way, our higher self is in an Ascended Master Consciousness. And that is what's being embodied. So this is very important to know, because so many people are talking about embodiment only meaning like if they feel their feelings. And that's not what embodiment means at all. That's important, and the emotional body needs full development for our own spiritual evolution, which I've talked about at length in different videos. But that's not embodiment. That's a part of the puzzle, but embodiment is the alchemical process. It's completely the core of alchemy. And what that's taking place is the transformation of the person. But not just the person, because what are we? We're more than just a person and an ego. In fact, we're a body, mind, spirit. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at what we are is a soul. So apply whichever term that you resonate to this. But what this is a state of consciousness that is transcendent. Each ascended master highlights a specific attribute of this state of being. Each one serves as both an eternal expression of this state of consciousness, as well as having human incarnations. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did humans first become ascended masters? Or is ascended masters a level of consciousness that already exists and is waiting to be tapped into? I see ascended masters as a level of consciousness first. It is a higher level of being that exists in a higher density. At this level, there is no more karma. It's fully liberated from the chain of action and reaction. This level understands that everything matures in its own way through its own exploration and assists us in our growth from this space of love while still giving us freedom. They look at us the same way we look at baby pictures of ourselves in a photo album. They are us in a different level of being, and they look at us as their past memories. At this level, All duality is alchemized into unity. Humans that go through the spiritual initiation process embody this level of consciousness in the human form. So ascended masters are how we can visually perceive and learn from this level of being. One example of this is Christ. Christ is the ascended master that represents the law of one. So Christ awakens people into the law of one. Saint Germain is the ascended master that represents spiritual alchemy, transmutation, and freedom. So Saint Germain teaches you how to become sovereign. Isis is the ascended master that represents the feminine consciousness of magic, alchemy, wisdom, and creation. So Isis initiates you into the mysteries behind creation. Ascended masters are the different archetypes of this level of consciousness. They serve as a type of medicine we work with and learn from. That's why you will see specific ascended masters walking with certain people. They do not intend to be worshipped. There is a massive difference between reverence and worship. Their true purpose is to help us evolve. Ascended master consciousness perceives everything as being perfect. This is what's so hard for us to grasp about this state. It could seem to us as out of touch or even disassociative, but it's because you have to understand with each level of consciousness, it will have an overall dominant perception. And so the dominant perception of the level of consciousness known as ascended master consciousness is one that holds so much space for evolution, for humans, for everything. It just perceives everything as perfect. It's almost as if ascended master consciousness doesn't even need to intervene, because that's how much an ascended master perceives something already as whole, complete, and perfect. It knows that everything that a human needs to experience for their evolution and growth will naturally already happen. So that's why it sees everything as not needing to be wrong or not needing to change, because life itself will naturally change and grow a person. We are always being shaped by our experiences, and we are always being shaped each day with whatever we learn or even choose not to learn. So even through our lack of awareness, we are still even being shaped and changed by that, for better or for worse. And so when the ascended master sees something as perfect, it's not because something doesn't need to change. It sees it as perfect because it sees something in a process, and it has so much unconditional love, meaning there's no conditions, no control, no agendas, pure unconditional love, that it sees the value and the purpose of even something going into a state of wrong or a detrimental state or just bad. So it's not that ascended master consciousness only sees good. Ascended master only sees perfection because it can see both bad and good. And when something is in a state that needs more help or needs more support, and the universe therefore gives it stronger catalysts, it holds that space of having unconditional love for that being or that person or that whatever. Because even in that fallen or toxic state, ascended master consciousness can see how that toxicity can serve valuable lessons for the all. So it's not because, once again, ascended master consciousness only sees love and goodness. It's because ascended master consciousness only sees the perfection in all of the many different paths that lead to love. So it's not just saying you should follow my way and my way is the only way and my way is the only good way. That is the opposite of Ascended Master. Ascended Master consciousness sees that no matter how weary, windy, bent, broken a person's path or road is, that still there is at every turn some form of catalyst that can help it and can give it that choice once again to either correct itself or not correct itself. And it sees how whatever choice a person, being, thing chooses is still going to serve the all in some way. Because whether it chooses to correct itself and become more conscious and chooses to become more healthy in its expression and then go about trying to make better thoughts, emotions, and actions and intentions that are based on having a healthier, more aligned expression, or whether it chooses to continue to misalign itself and distort itself and become further toxic. That either way, it is going to serve other people's own lessons. And it does that through the law of attraction. Because if a person is making certain choices, let's say to always give away their sovereignty. Let's say they've made choices lifetime after lifetime to continuously externalize their own authority, give it away, give their power away. Well, then that is providing that person with experiences that are gonna, through the law of attraction, match them up to forms of toxicity, whatever way you want to call it that, or what we would call bad. So Ascended Master Consciousness just holds that unconditional love for whatever thing a person chooses, which is why, once again, we see that free will is a natural part of this universe, because unconditional love is the perception that all choices, right, they're not fully controlled. There's free will in them. But that whatever a person, a being chooses is still going to have a path. No matter how weary or bad it looks, it's still going to have a choice and therefore a path that leads to unconditional love, that leads to Ascended Master Consciousness. And so this is exactly what I mean by Ascended Master Consciousness sees everything through the perception of perfect. And so it can be hard sometimes for us to really embody and grasp this level because it seems almost negligent. To the untrained eye, Ascended Master Consciousness could seem like it's spiritual bypassing or that it's too passive, but it's not. Remember, Ascended Master Consciousness is an ascended state. So because of that, it came to that conclusion through a large spiritual evolution journey. That's also kind of why you hear some Zen quotes about how, like, you talk and you talk and you talk until you realize that silence is the largest teacher and the ultimate truth. That would be kind of a quote, I would say, that comes from Ascended Master Consciousness. It's because it is not bypassing. What it does is understand that each person will learn from whoever their closest match of a teacher is, vibrationally, and that there is no point at all to disrupt that by lowering your own consciousness, or by the Ascended Master lowering their own consciousness to try to be that person or that being's teacher. Because once again, the law of attraction will line them up with the perfect teacher. And everything is a teacher. The trees are teachers. The garbage truck is a teacher. Birds are a teacher. So when I say teacher, I don't only mean an actual teacher. I mean everything can be our teacher. And so the Ascended Master Consciousness is aware that a person is always going to get whatever teacher and teachers that they need. So then, if spiritual bypassing is not what an ascended master does, but also they don't intervene and they find everything perfect as is, then how are they useful beyond being unconditional love? Ascended master consciousness is absolutely vital for a person to not only embody, but to be able to live by, because we won't be able to see things in their full truth. And we won't be able to see things clearly if we do not have ascended master consciousness embodied. That's why it's so important, because ascended master consciousness is not in judgment. Once again, their dominant expression is through unconditional love. But with that unconditional love, what you have is the equal parts of being able to truthfully perceive things in their entirety, as well as emotionally hold space and grace for others and everything. So when you have this combination married within the person, so it's unified, what you'll see is that this state can elevate humanity, a collective, a world, a realm. It can elevate it. It can exalt it into its higher consciousness state. So instead of a world or a realm or human beings being in their lower consciousness perception, which is normally called separation consciousness, ascended master consciousness is what we need to embody to truly know what is actually going to help. So what actions to genuinely invest in versus what actions were coming from kind of like a half-baked version of us, meaning well, trying to, but ultimately still kind of like having our actions feed some sort of distortion. So you see here, ascended master consciousness is not passive. It just happens to be so high vibrational, so ascended, that it will look disassociative if we are very far away from it. The more we embody it, we'll actually see that in the human form, once it's truly integrated within our body, mind, spirit, that actually ascended master consciousness is how we will experience a paradigm shift. It is how we will go on the organic ascension timelines. It's all done through ascended master consciousness. Now, there's two main ways that you'll be able to tell that you've been already experiencing ascended master consciousness and that it's working its way into your own being. The first way is if you have an overwhelming sense of unconditional love for other people's ability to make their own choices. This is because what you're experiencing is the lack of control that the ego usually has with its smaller consciousness. The higher consciousness does not have that type of control. They know, once again, that each thing has the right at a universal level, even beyond universal level. Each thing has the right to experience what it chooses to experience because it's free and it's sovereign. So it has unconditional love for other people's choices because it's not at all in a state of judgment. It just sees something through the purity of a crystal clear lens. No distortions, no filters on top of that lens. It's looking straight at something and it's allowing it to be in that state because it knows that it has the right to its own growth. It has the right to its own evolution, or it has the right to learn lessons the very hard and painful way. And that we've both all been in those positions. So this is why I love that one quote from Oscar Wilde. Each sinner has a future and each saint had a past. That's ascended master consciousness. So the second way that we'll be able to tell that we are already experiencing ascended master consciousness is if you see everything as perfect. And I know that that's really hard to grasp because the lower mind or the ego loves to create a fight against ascended master consciousness. It cannot see how Ascended Master Consciousness actually is not opposing any other level of consciousness. It's not opposing separation consciousness. It's not opposing the lower states. So what the ego will do when it hears this truth about Ascended Master Consciousness perceiving everything as just perfect is the ego, the unintegrated ego, will be mad and try to pit Ascended Master Consciousness against lower consciousness. And it will try to start a war between those two states of being and those two levels of consciousness. But Ascended Master Consciousness, to even be an Ascended Master, whichever Ascended Masters you love, to be in that state meant that it had already integrated every level of consciousness below it. So it's actually not perceiving a fight. There's no fight. There's nothing to oppose in Ascended Master Consciousness. There's only paradox, because everything I said earlier can just be looked at as that perfection, while it's a perfection through paradox. It only sees paradox and the ecosystem that we call reciprocity. And so because of that, the lower consciousness will try to pit Ascended Master Consciousness against it, but it's a one-way fight. Ascended Master Consciousness has already consumed and straight up transformed and transmuted the lower consciousness. But I digress. So the second way that you will be able to tell that you are already experiencing Ascended Master Consciousness is if you are starting to see the world as already perfect, as is. And not because it's perfect, but because it's allowed to be in a state of growth. It's allowed to be in a state of learning. It's allowed to not be perfect. And because of that, paradoxically, it is perfect. It will get all of the resources. It will get all of the support that it needs. So an Ascended Master is not here to be passive on earth and to teach people spiritual bypassing. What it's meant to do is actually show people how to embody that state of consciousness, how to ascend, how to go through their spiritual evolution, so that they can actually use that level of consciousness in their body to make the most impactful, the most aligned actions and changes. Because what you'll find then is that's actually when you'll get a lasting and deeply rooted paradigm shift. Not one of those fleeting ones that comes from the ego and all of the different distortions that it's trying to accomplish by not being in that state of higher consciousness. So we actually are always putting our energy into something. It's whether are we using our energy to suppress ourselves from our own growth, or are we using that energy to fully embody higher states of consciousness, no matter how uncomfortable that could be to our lower mind. And what we'll see is that one of the massive traits of Ascended Master Consciousness is instant manifestation. So actually, the more we embody Ascended Master Consciousness, the more we can effortlessly manifest. Because if we're effortlessly manifesting, that means that we're so in alignment that we need to do less force, less coercion, less control. I hope this has ascended your consciousness. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.